Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. Last week, the Bank of Korea projected South Korea's gross domestic product to grow by 3% this year and 2.5% in 2023. It said the South Korean economy is forecast to continue its sound growth, supported by the reopening of global economic activities and the easing of domestic social distancing measures, despite rising internal and external uncertainties.
And on the same day, the BOK froze the benchmark interest rate at 1.25% after two back-to-back hikes. On the rate decision, the central bank's policymakers were unanimous. For more, we connect to Jun-sok, professor of economics at Sookmyung Women's University School of Business. Good morning, Professor.
Morning.
So at 1.25%, the BOK has brought the benchmark interest rate back to the level it was pre-pandemic. Do you think this suggests the central bank believes the economy is still largely out of the woods when it comes to COVID-19?
Not exactly. I think Korean economy is still struggling to get out. The Monetary Policy Board announced to hold the interest rate steady, citing Russia's invasion, COVID-19 pandemic, and inflation. One of the major reasons hidden would be political considerations. So I suppose the Bank of Korea tried to hold this rate as possible until May, before the new president takes office. Bank of Korea forecasts consumer price to rise 3.1% in 2022 from 2.5 previous forecast. Global supply bottleneck and price rise in energy and raw material due to Russian military action push Korea's inflation higher than that of last year. Careful adjustment of the rates would be needed since inflation is projected to continue in 2022. As it is in the transition period of COVID-19 pandemic, Korean economy is forecast to continue its sound growth, supported by reopening of global economic activity and ease of social distancing rules.
Right. At last week's meeting, the governor of the Bank of Korea dismissed concerns about stagflation. I know you've mentioned it numerous times when we have our conversations. He is saying growth is solid, exports are doing well, and domestic consumption is pretty much fine. Where do you stand in regards to the governor's assessment that Korea isn't set to enter some kind of period of stagflation?
Stagflation is a situation of stagnant growth with high inflation. So for the short term, I think differently. Not to mention of high inflation, there are many risk factors, imminent signs of stagflation. Export market outlook seems great, mainly due to Russian-Ukraine military tension. As Korea made it clear, participating in economic sanction, Washington is expected to demand Korea restrict its export of key industrial items to Russia, called foreign direct product rule. Under this measure, Korean companies in the semiconductor, automotive, and electronic appliance industry would find themselves unable to ship product to Russia. Secondly, financial volatility in the foreign exchange market will be another burden for Korea to tackle it. The U.S. put financial sanctions in place against Russian banks. China will support Russia by international trade, providing items blocked by U.S. Depending on the response of the U.S., the Chinese yuan would be projected to be volatile, closely linked with production cost of Korean companies. There is every reason that Korea should manage the risk factors, stagflation, at least for the time being.
But Professor, when it comes to the interest rate decision, do you think the BOK policymakers paid much heed to the fact that there's a presidential election coming up in a week, or do they generally avoid taking political matters into consideration?
In short, they do take the presidential election into account. Two major things to be considered in their interest rate decision. First one is political consideration. Interest rate change would be one of the most powerful instruments in the market. When it comes to the matter of how to use it, it would be much better for the BOK to save this powerful tool for the next government. Unless there happens urgent economic shock due to overall changes, the reference rate of 1.25% would be kept highly likely until May. Secondly, finance theory tells the future. The pace of U.S. Fed rate change might be material factors. When the Bank of Korea make its monetary policy decision. There is a significant relationship between foreign exchange rate difference between two countries and interest rate gap between two countries. In a way to stabilize the exchange rate fluctuations, the BOK should keep pace with the Fed rate changes. As long as the Fed rate hold its status, the BOK afford to hold the interest rate steady. This pace control process is also a part of political negotiations.
Yeah, well, the Fed have been indicating that they will start tapering their bond buying program in the coming weeks and months. So we're going to have to see how the Bank of Korea reacts to that. In regards to the growth forecast put out there by South Korea's central bank, 3% this year, 2.5% in 2023. Do you share the Bank of Korea's semi-optimistic view that the economy is generally heading in the right direction over the next couple of years or so?
You got the point. Semi-optimistic. Yes, I believe Korean economy keeps on sound and stable growth about 3% because Korean industry has successfully transferred into the advanced digital transformation, especially in the sector of entertainment, game, film, and K-culture, creating new source of growing momentum. What is needed now for Korea to continue its performance? Two things. First, supply chain resilience is the top priority. Upstream urban industry, raw materials and component sectors are composed mainly of small and medium companies, very fragile to the shock. Once the supply chain has disrupted due to irreversibility, it is very hard to restore the chain. As a cushion for a business shock, there could be a necessity for a government to store a relief fund or support financing for sustaining supply chain operation in preparation for the public situation. Secondly, resource and energy diplomacy may be an inflection point for another Korean trade policy. Now is the right time to make an economic partnership with Middle East countries in a way to stabilize the source of energy, to deliver business, to diversify business opportunity in the Middle East areas.
All right, Professor Oh, thank you so much for your insights. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.